I'm going to start talking. The few people I'm going to talk about here briefly are all people I know. I've known them all my life. And the first one is Ted Wittner. Has anyone here heard of Ted Wittner? He's a local person who he passed away very recently, but he was involved in a lot of interesting things. And I want to tell you about it. He is a very successful entrepreneur. And I knew him when I was growing up. And I would go to his house, and when he was 10 or 11 years old, I would go to his house in the garage, and he was making little lead soldiers and selling them. He was that kind of a person. His family were people of very modest means, and he anticipated when he went to the University of Florida that he was going to have to help out. And so he got there, and he went to a football game. I happened to be there, I remember. And he said, "Look at these hundreds of people all waiting to be sold something." That's the way he was. He started out, he had at the football games, he was prepared with a big sack of plastic raincoats that he sold there. And that was one of the things he did all the time he was there at University of Florida. Another thing he did, he had a route, a Sunday donut route in the dormitories. And he had that going. And he had a few more things. And he kept himself busy besides his studies with that. When he left the University of Florida, graduated, he came back to St. Petersburg, and he wanted to get into the insurance business. He thought that's where he belonged, in the insurance business. So, and he didn't know a heck of a lot about it. He knew marketing, he knew things he learned in school. He didn't know much about that, and he found out right away that it wasn't exactly what he had in mind, because first of all, he found out there was an oversupply of insurance salespeople. The area was loaded with insurance salespeople. And he investigated, and he noticed that they were essentially selling the same policies, that there were about 8 or 10 insurance companies that represented all these different people, and they're all competing against one another. He didn't want to do that. And I remember discussions about it. He studied it and studied it. He found a company in Canada called Crown Life Insurance of Canada, which was a very well-liked and financially very strong insurance company, and they didn't have much input into Florida at that time. He went up to Canada, he talked to them, and he had an exclusive, which later became very material. He had an exclusive with them, so he was starting out, he was selling a product that nobody else was selling around here. And he did very well. He was financially very successful. He made some money, and he wanted to invest it, and he thought of commercial real estate, office buildings, things like that. And the first thing he found out was that was a bad time for that. It was a very low ebb, that about 35% of the office spaces in St. Pete and Tampa were vacant. So that was a problem, but it didn't bother him, and he decided that what he was going to do was not compete with all the rest of them, because their rents were very inexpensive because they had so many of them. He was going to find something that cost more than theirs, but he was going to give them not only more, but something they couldn't get anywhere else. And he looked it up, and he came across an idea of limited partnership, which up to that point had not been used in this way before, and very interesting. And so, in effect, what he was doing, he was leasing large spaces, and the people actually became owners. So they were paying rent to themselves, so not really, but indirectly. And it was very attractive to especially larger companies that rented a whole floor, because he was going to build a 12-story building and then another building next to it. And he was very successful because it was different. It was something that nobody else knew about right then. And so he went ahead and he did that, and it was better than he thought, and it became profitable quicker than he anticipated. He thought he'd have the property for 8 to 10 years, and then him and all the other tenants who were owners, they would all make some money. But actually, 2 years after he built that building called City Center downtown St. Petersburg, that's the building. 2 years after he bought it, it was sold to a very large company, the whole thing. And all the tenants were just dancing around because here they had all made a lot of money, and they still had their leases, and they still had the same control. So it's very interesting how he figured that out. And so he proceeded to do another one in Sarasota, a larger one. Well,
Don, do you want to show a picture of that building?
oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Here. I brought, I don't know, there's probably a dozen of them. Can I pass them some around?
That's the city center.
That building incidentally had a President's Club restaurant on the roof, and it was so attractive, and it is to this day, that people would rent out the lobby on Sundays for weddings. So it gives you an idea of, you know, he delivered the goods, you know, what people wanted.
So he built that city center?
Yeah, he built the city center. He built many buildings in St. Pete, and he built a similar city center in Sarasota.
Okay.
After this one that is larger.
Is that on First Street?
This one is on 2nd Avenue and
Second
Beach Drive South.
Beach, okay.
Either Beach or
It's on the south.
yeah, it's on 2nd Avenue
Second
and
Avenue,
1st Street, I
about First
think.
Street
Yeah.
south,
Okay.
something like that.
You can't miss it because it's the only attractive looking building. So, I read well, first of all, I want to say that one thing that made him successful were the people he surrounded himself with. He was very careful in trying to pick people that he thought were the kind of people that could be productive. And this is a quote that I cut out. It was on a newspaper article that he wrote a few years ago. And it said, among the traits he looks for in those he gathers around him are an entrepreneurial spirit, dedication, impeccable integrity, and people who want their boss's job. I like to see two things grow: people and projects. So he was quoted as saying that. But he also did a lot in the community, and right up to the end, he was well known as a person who invested a lot back in the city, and that was also part of his program, and he encouraged the people that worked with him. He had about 90 people, up until recently, and they all got involved, and they all had a wonderful experience, and they felt good about it.